My name is Harley Sims, and I never imagined the day I'd find out my daughter was dying from a stranger on the phone. I had flown across the country with a heart full of hope, carrying a wooden jewelry box I'd carved for her, thinking I was bringing joy. Instead, I walked into a nightmare. While she lay in intensive care, clinging to life, her husband was raising champagne glasses on a yacht funded with my own money. That was the moment I knew something inside me had to change. What followed was not just a fight for my daughter's survival, but a reckoning for the man who abandoned her. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more stories like this one. I thought I was flying to Los Angeles for hugs, laughter, and a surprise reunion that would heal years of distance. Instead, I stepped into silence. After 3 hours in the air, my legs were stiff, and my heart pounded with nervous excitement. I kept picturing Matilda opening her front door, her children rushing forward with drawings and sticky fingers, her voice scolding me gently for showing up unannounced. That was the picture in my mind as I rode from LAX to Studio City, clutching the wooden jewelry box I had carved in my garage, a gift to keep Martha's wedding ring safe until Emma was old enough. It was more than wood and hinges. It was tradition memory and a father's promise that family would always endure. But the house that greeted me didn't match the vision. The shutters were closed tight, and the rose bushes Matilda once loved to send me photos of were brittle and brown. My heart gave a slow, uncertain beat as I pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed, then faded into nothing. I tried again, holding the button longer, listening for footsteps, laughter, even the bark of a dog. Silence answered back. "Matilda, it's Dad." I called, knocking against the frame, my knuckles sharp against the wood. No reply. For the first time in years, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with weather. Something was wrong. I walked around to the side gate, peering into the backyard. Dust covered the patio chairs. The vegetable garden was nothing but dried stems, and a child's tricycle lay tipped over as if abandoned mid-ride. My throat tightened. Matilda had always taken pride in her home, her garden, her children's laughter filling every corner. Now it looked like life had stopped without warning. I returned to the front step, sinking down with the jewelry box heavy in my lap. That's when a neighbor appeared, an elderly woman in a sun hat carrying garden shears. "Looking for the McCoys?" she asked. "Yes, I'm Matilda's father," I answered quickly, standing with more hope than I felt. "Have you seen them lately?" She hesitated, wiping her forehead with the back of her wrist. "Come to think of it, no. Been awful quiet over there. Usually hear the children most mornings. But it's been weeks." Her words dropped like stones into the pit of my stomach. When she walked away, I sat again, staring at the mailbox overflowing with envelopes and circulars. Some had postmarks going back 10 days. My hand trembled as I picked one up, reading Gary's name printed across it. He hadn't even bothered to clear the bills. The silence pressed harder against me, and I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Matilda's contact. 1 ring. 2. Then voicemail. Her cheerful, recorded voice cut into me like a knife. I called again, then again, until finally a male voice answered. "This is Dr. Rivera from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Are you a family member of Matilda McCoy?" And in that instant, my world shifted forever. The doctor's words echoed in my ears long after the call ended. "Your daughter is in intensive care. Stage 4 cancer, critical condition." I sat frozen on her porch steps, the jewelry box slipping from my lap and clattering against the concrete. Just hours before I had been picturing a warm embrace. Now I was trying to breathe in a world where my daughter was fighting for her life and I hadn't even known. I stumbled to my feet, every movement mechanical, and flagged down the first yellow cab I could find. Cedars Sinai Medical Center, I said, voice raw. The driver glanced back in the mirror, reading my face better than my words. He didn't waste time with questions. "Traffic's bad this time of day," he muttered, pressing harder on the gas. "But I'll get you there." The city outside blurred into meaningless motion, palm trees, neon signs, the endless sprawl of Los Angeles. None of it mattered. All I saw was Matilda at 6 years old, running across the kitchen with scraped knees, holding up her school drawing, as if it were the Mona Lisa. I remembered walking her down the aisle just 2 years earlier, Gary's hand shaking mine with empty promises. "I'll take care of your daughter, sir." Where was that man now? I tried calling Gary. Once. Twice. 4 times. Straight to voicemail. My fingers tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. At that moment, anger began to stir beneath my grief. He hadn't told me about her diagnosis. He hadn't called when she was admitted. And now, as my daughter lay tethered to machines, he was nowhere. The taxi slowed in front of glass and steel Cedars Sinai, rising like some clinical fortress. My legs felt foreign as I paid the fare and stumbled toward the automatic doors. Inside, bright lights and polished floors mocked the storm inside me. Families moved in quiet desperation, mothers clutching children, husbands whispering to wives. I was just another face among them, yet my pain felt singular, unbearable. At the information desk, I forced out the words, "Oncology Intensive Care." My daughter, Matilda McCoy. A badge was clipped to my shirt, my name scrawled shaky from hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The elevator ride felt eternal, each ding of a floor number like a countdown to devastation. When the doors opened, antiseptic air burned my nostrils. Machines beeped from every direction, keeping strangers alive. And then I saw her. Room 712. Matilda. She looked small in the bed, her once vibrant body shrunken, her hair-thinned tubes snaking into her arms. For a moment I couldn't move. I had built bridges, skyscrapers, entire systems in my career, but I had never felt so powerless. Then her eyes opened and she saw me. "Daddy," she whispered. Just that word. My knees nearly buckled, but I reached her side in 3 steps and wrapped her frail frame in my arms. Tears burned down my face. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." And in her smile, weak but real, I found both devastation and purpose. Holding Matilda's hand in that hospital room, I tried to keep my voice steady, but my heart was breaking with every beep of the monitor. She looked at me with a mixture of relief and guilt, as though she had something to apologize for. "I didn't tell you because you've already lost so much, Dad," she whispered. "After Mom, I couldn't put this weight on you too. I thought I could handle it alone." Alone. The word stabbed me deeper than I expected. My daughter had been fighting cancer, raising 2 children, and carrying the silence of her suffering without me. I smoothed her blanket, tucking it around her the way I used to when she was a little girl. "Sweetheart, you should never have had to face this alone. I would have been here the very first day if I'd known." Her lips trembled, and I could see the effort it took to hold back tears. "Gary said he was handling things. He said the stress would be too much for you." She paused, her eyes flicking toward the IV stand. "He's been busy." "Busy," I repeated, anger flickering beneath my grief. "Too busy to be at your side." She looked away, staring at the blinds where a strip of late sunlight filtered through. "Business meetings." That's what he tells me. He hasn't stayed overnight in weeks. My grip tightened on her hand, but I forced my voice calm. I didn't want to upset her more. Inside, though, a storm was brewing. Gary had promised me he'd protect her. Instead, he was leaving her to face death with only machines and nurses for company. I stayed by her bed until her eyelids grew heavy. Each time she stirred, her eyes would search the room until they found me again, as if she was making sure I was real and not just another fading dream. Only when her breathing deepened into steady sleep did I stand stretching my back and pulling out my phone. I thought about calling Gary again, but something in me resisted. I already knew he wouldn't answer. Still, a father's instinct demands answers. I reached for Matilda's phone lying on the bedside table. I told myself I only wanted to check if he had been calling her, but the truth was I needed to know the kind of man he had become. Her phone unlocked easily, and I opened the call log. The last time Gary had called her was 3 days ago. 3 days. My jaw clenched. My daughter lay here frail and frightened while her husband disappeared into thin air. Then a notification slid across the screen: Instagram. At the top of the feed, a story glowed with Gary's profile picture. I tapped it, and my blood ran cold. There he was, smiling on the deck of a luxury yacht, champagne glass in hand-arm around strangers, while the Pacific sparkled behind him. A caption scrawled across the screen: "Living my best life with the boys." At that moment, I felt grief transform into something sharper, something that demanded action. I stared at that glowing screen, my heart pounding louder than the monitors in Matilda's room. My daughter was tethered to tubes, clinging to life, and her husband was toasting strangers on a yacht less than an hour away. Rage didn't come in shouts or curses. It came in a cold clarity I hadn't felt in years. I took a screenshot, then another, documenting every grin, every glass raised, every moment he thought he could live carefree, while my daughter fought for breath. I swiped through his stories, diving into the ocean, lounging on white cushions, posting captions about getting away from reality. Reality was here in room 712 with the woman he vowed to love and protect. Reality was in the tears Matilda shed when she thought she was burdening me. He had abandoned her, but worse, he had deceived us all. My hands trembled as I closed the app and opened my banking account. A memory flickered: Gary's request a year earlier. He had come to me with solemn eyes, speaking about medical bills and house repairs. "Just temporary access to your backup account," he'd said. "I don't want Matilda stressed about money." I had admired what I thought was his selflessness. I had believed he was shielding her. But as the transaction history loaded, the truth struck like a hammer. Yacht charter, $15,000. Beverly Hills restaurants, thousands more. Rodeo Drive shopping sprees, luxury car services. My money spent without hesitation while my daughter lay abandoned in a hospital bed. Each line of that statement was not just a transaction. It was an insult, a slap to the face of every promise Gary had ever made. I sat back, forcing my breath to steady. My career as an engineer had taught me one thing: when a system fails, you don't rage, you diagnose, you document, and you dismantle. And that's exactly what I intended to do. I pulled out a small notebook I carried everywhere, scribbling down account numbers, transaction dates, totals. Every careless indulgence became another nail in the coffin of Gary's credibility. I wasn't just a grieving father anymore. I was an investigator, a man assembling proof that no court could ignore. The weight of exhaustion pressed down, but clarity kept me upright. My daughter needed strength, not another weak man making excuses. I leaned close to her sleeping form, brushing a hand across her hair. "Rest, sweetheart," I whispered. "Daddy's here now, and I'm going to make this right." As the room hummed softly with machines, my phone buzzed again. It was as if fate itself had delivered the next step. Gary's name lit up the screen. I stepped quietly into the hallway away from Matilda's rest and answered with a voice as steady as steel. What did you do? He barked his words, slurred with panic. My cards were just declined, in front of everyone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Where are you right now, Gary? His hesitation was all the confirmation I required. His silence told me everything before he even opened his mouth. The muffled thump of music and waves lapping against the hull bled through the phone. That's not your business, Gary snapped at last, his voice tight with humiliation. Listen, old man, you need to fix this. Restore my access right now. I gripped the phone tighter, forcing my voice low and deliberate. Your wife is lying in intensive care, Gary, my daughter. And you're out there on a yacht drinking champagne with my money. For a few seconds, all I heard was the party noise around him, faltering voices, arguing in the background. Then his tone shifted from demanding to defensive. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I needed a break. Networking. These trips, they're for business. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Business, is that what you call abandoning your children while their mother fights for her life? He raised his voice, desperate now. If you cut me off, I'll file for divorce. I'll take the kids. Don't think a court won't side with me. I'm her husband. That was it, the line he should never have crossed. Threatening my grandchildren was like striking a match in a dry field. I let a long pause stretch across the line before answering. Gary, you just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic life. Behind me, I heard movement. Matilda was awake, her thin frame shifting against the pillows, her eyes wide and brimming as she realized she was listening to her husband's true voice for the first time. Her tears weren't from sadness, they were from clarity. She finally understood. Gary sputtered on the line. You can't do this to me. I have rights. People respect me, my reputation. Your reputation. I cut him off, my voice like ice. Let me tell you what people will respect: the evidence. The bank records, the screenshots, the recordings. Every dollar you stole, every moment you abandoned her, every threat you just made, I have it all. Tell me, Gary, which judge will hand you custody after that? For the first time, I heard the crack in his confidence. Panic, pure and raw. Harley, please, we can talk. I can change. I'll come back, No, I said simply. You chose yachts over hospitals, parties over your children, money over family, and now you will live with the consequences. The line went dead as I blocked his number, the action final as slamming a door. I stood there for a moment, the quiet of the hospital hallway wrapping around me. Then I walked back into room 7 on 12 where my daughter waited. Matilda's hand reached for mine, trembling but strong in spirit. Thank you, Daddy. She whispered, her eyes wet with both grief and relief. You never have to thank me for protecting you, sweetheart, I said, brushing her hair back gently. That's what fathers do. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt purpose ignite again. I sat in the dim glow of the hospital cafeteria, the untouched coffee cooling in front of me. My mind wasn't clouded by rage anymore. It was sharpened, every detail clicking into place like blueprints on a drafting board. Gary thought he could abandon my daughter and children, live like a king on stolen money, and still hold power over us. He was wrong. My entire life had been about solving problems with precision, and now the problem had a name: Gary McCoy. I opened my banking app again, staring at the list of transactions. Each charge was another insult: $15,000 for a yacht, $2,400 for luxury car service, thousands for rodeo drive shopping. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about what those numbers meant. While Matilda sat through chemotherapy, weak and frightened, Gary raised champagne glasses. While her hair fell out in clumps, he tried on tailored suits. Every swipe of his card was a choice to abandon her. I flipped open my notebook, methodically writing down account numbers, transaction IDs, and dates. If there was one thing I knew, it was that records don't lie. Courts may twist words, people may invent stories, but cold numbers always tell the truth. I underlined the totals, building my case. Then I called the bank. "This is Harley Sims' account holder," I said firmly when the operator answered. "I need to revoke all authorized access immediately." The woman on the line went through her routine. "We'll need to verify your identity, Mr. Sims." I rattled off my information without hesitation. After 45 years with the same institution, my voice alone carried weight, but protocol was protocol. "Yes," she confirmed. "I see Gary McCoy has had access to your backup account since April 2022. Are you requesting complete revocation of privileges, immediate and permanent?" I said. "Transfer all remaining funds to my secured account. Cancel any linked services, recurring payments, or credit cards tied to his name. Every connection gone." "Sir, I need to inform you this action is irreversible," she cautioned. "Good," I replied. "Make it final." There was a pause, the faint click of keys in the background. Then her calm voice returned. "That's $127,000 transferred to your primary account. His cards have been deactivated. Any attempted transactions will be declined. You'll receive confirmation emails shortly." I ended the call, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time since stepping onto Matilda's porch, I felt like I had regained control. Gary's lifeline had been severed with surgical precision. No more yachts, no more champagne, no more living off the back of my daughter's suffering and my trust. I glanced at my phone, already buzzing with confirmation alerts. I could almost imagine Gary's face when his next swipe failed, when his world of lies and luxury collapsed in front of his so-called friends. I leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. This was only the beginning. He had chosen betrayal. I had chosen consequence. And I wasn't finished yet. I didn't return to Matilda's room right away. Instead, I found a quiet alcove near the hospital chapel, a wooden chair tucked against the wall where the noise of shift changes faded into background hum. I laid out my notebook, phone, and the stack of confirmation emails. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about building an airtight case that no judge, lawyer, or jury could dismiss. Gary had lived too long on half-truths and charm. Numbers and screenshots would strip him bare. I scrolled back through his Instagram feed, documenting every yacht photo, every smug smile, every toast. Screenshot after screenshot, saved and organized by timestamp. Each one told the same story. While Matilda's body weakened under chemotherapy, Gary was strengthening his image as a carefree bachelor, financed by money he didn't earn. Then I returned to the bank statements, cross-referencing charges with the dates of his posts. Marina del Rey Yacht Charter. April the 12th matched perfectly with his grinning video champagne flute raised. Luxury dinner in Beverly Hills, April 15th. There he was tagged in a friend's post, steak and cocktails on display. Each pairing was like a nail driven into the coffin of his credibility. I underlined them in red ink in my notebook. My training as an engineer had never left me. I thought in systems. Problems had failure points, and Gary was riddled with them. I was documenting his collapse with the same precision I once used to test steel beams. And I wasn't alone in this fight. My daughter needed an advocate, my grandchildren needed protection, and I would not fail them. My phone buzzed again. Not Gary this time, but a notification from my bank. Fraud alert, activated cards, declined access, terminated. Somewhere out there on the ocean, Gary was finding out what it meant to lose control. I almost wished I could see it, the waiter handing him the declined receipt. The friend's raised eyebrows, the mask of confidence cracking. But I had more important work to do. I began drafting a timeline, starting with the day Matilda told me on the phone she was just tired. From that call 3 months ago until today, I listed every key moment: her decline, the hospital admission, Gary's absence, his spending spree. By the time I finished, the pattern was undeniable. A husband who abandoned his sick wife, a father who neglected his children, a thief who squandered his father-in-law's life savings. As I closed the notebook, I felt something shift inside me. For years, grief had kept me paralyzed, drowning in memories of Martha and regrets about the distance between Matilda and me. But now I had purpose again. Not the kind that builds bridges or skyscrapers, but the kind that restores dignity to the people I loved most. I slipped the notebook into my jacket and stood glancing toward the chapel doors. I didn't pray, not out loud. But I made a silent vow in that moment: Gary would never touch my daughter or grandchildren again. The first call came just after midnight. I was sitting by Matilda's bedside, her frail fingers curled loosely around mine, when my phone buzzed against the plastic tray table. Gary's name glared across the screen. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but then I realized his panic was the first crack in the armor, and I intended to widen it. I slipped into the hallway and answered with a flat, steady voice. "Harley." "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, his voice cracking beneath the thin veneer of confidence. "My cards were declined at the marina. In front of everyone, I couldn't even pay the crew. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I let silence stretch long enough for him to hear his own desperation echo back at him. "I know exactly what I did," I said at last. "I cut you off. No more yachts. No more champagne. No more spending my money while your wife lies in intensive care. You can't just—" His voice faltered, then sharpened. "I'm her husband. I have rights." I almost smiled at the irony. A husband is at his wife's bedside. A husband comforts his children when their mother is sick. You forfeited that title the moment you chose the ocean over her hospital room. There was shouting in the background, men arguing, someone demanding payment. Gary hissed into the phone, lowering his voice. "Harley, listen. I needed a break. The stress has been unbearable. You don't understand." "No, you don't understand." I cut him off, my voice hard as steel. "I've documented everything. Every charge, every post, every call you didn't make. If you think you can crawl into divorce court and demand custody of Emma and Jack, you'll be laughed out of the building. The evidence is against you." For a moment, all I heard was his breathing, ragged, shallow, frantic. Then his desperation twisted into anger. "If you don't restore my access, I'll make sure Matilda loses everything. I'll drag her name through the mud. You'll regret this." I lowered my voice to a whisper, the kind that carried more weight than any shout. "You just threatened a dying woman. I hope you realize what that means, Gary, because I recorded every word." There was a stunned pause, and then the line went dead. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and leaned against the cool hospital wall. My pulse was steady, my breathing calm. He had shown me his fear, and fear makes men sloppy. That was the advantage I needed. Back in the room, Matilda stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering open. "Dad," she murmured. I sat beside her again, smoothing her blanket. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. Daddy's here." But as I watched her drift off again, I knew the real battle had only just begun. Gary wasn't finished, but neither was I. The next morning, I walked into the hospital cafeteria with a black coffee I didn't plan to drink. My phone buzzed again. Gary. I let it ring until the last second, then answered with a quiet, "What is it?" His voice was frayed, almost unrecognizable. "Harley, please. I don't have cash for the yacht balance. They're threatening to call the police. My friends won't cover me. I just need access to the account again just for today. I'll fix everything." I almost laughed. The man who once carried himself like a Wall Street shark now sounded like a cornered rat. "Access is gone," I said flatly, "permanently. You don't understand, they'll ruin me." His voice cracked high and sharp. "My reputation." "Your reputation," I interrupted. "Gary, your reputation is already ruined. The moment you chose champagne over chemotherapy, you lost every shred of respect you had. And now you'll lose what little you thought you could hold on to." There was a heavy silence. I could almost hear the gears in his head turning, desperation clawing at any angle left. Then he tried a new tactic, threats wrapped in false bravado. "If you think you can cut me off without consequences, you're wrong. I'll tell people you interfered in my finances illegally. I'll say you manipulated Matilda against me. Courts listen to husbands, not bitter old men." I let out a slow breath, measured and calm. "Say whatever you want. I have screenshots, bank records, timestamps, and now—" I paused for effect. "Your recorded phone calls. The more you talk, the deeper your hole gets." His breath caught. "You recorded me, yes. Every word of you threatening to take custody away from a dying mother. Every excuse you made about needing a break while your children asked where their father was. I don't think a judge will side with you, Gary. I think a judge will tear you apart." For once, he didn't argue. Just a broken sound on the other end of the line, half growl, half sob. I stood from my table, walking toward the hospital window. The sun was rising over Los Angeles, casting light across the city's sprawl. "Here's the reality, Gary. You thought you could use me, use my money, and walk away untouched. But you underestimated the one thing you can't buy: a father's resolve. You can't just erase me," he muttered weakly. "You already erased yourself," I said, lowering my voice so he couldn't mistake my meaning. "I'm just documenting it for the record." I hung up before he could answer, blocking his number a second time. My phone buzzed moments later with his frantic attempts from another line, but I ignored them all. Let him scramble. Let him feel the humiliation of every declined card and unanswered call. Back in room 712, Matilda stirred and whispered, "Was that Gary?" I took her hand gently. Not anymore. By the time evening fell, Gary's mask had all but crumbled. He had tried anger threats, begging, and silence, but desperation always finds a way to crawl back. My phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I answered, already knowing it was him. "Harley," his voice rasped, "we need to meet. Just once. Face to face. We can work this out like men." I almost laughed at the audacity. Like men, real men, don't abandon their wives in hospitals and drain their father-in-law's savings for yachts and designer clothes. "This is bigger than you think," he snapped, but the tremor in his tone betrayed him. "If people find out, I could lose everything." "That's the point, Gary," I said calmly. "You should lose everything. Because you already lost the right to be called a husband or a father." There was silence, just his shallow breathing. Then, in a last-ditch plea, he shifted tactics again. "If you restore the account, I'll come back. I'll sit by her bed, I'll do the father thing for the kids. She doesn't have long, Harley. Don't you want her last days to feel normal?" That was the moment I knew Gary's soul was bankrupt. He wasn't offering comfort. He was bargaining with grief. I tightened my grip on the phone until my knuckles whitened. My daughter doesn't need an actor at her bedside. She needs truth. And the truth is, you're finished. He sputtered, searching for another angle. "You can't just cut me out. You'll what?" I cut him off sharply. Threaten custody again. Spend money you no longer have. Or maybe try explaining to a judge why you were photographed on a yacht while your wife lay in intensive care silence. Just the faint sound of waves in the background. You see, Gary, I continued, voice low and final. I don't need to raise my voice or throw punches. All I need are facts, bank records, screenshots, recordings. The truth is you're undoing, and it's already in motion. From this moment forward, every door you try to open will slam shut in your face. He started to beg again, words tumbling, but I ended the call mid-sentence and blocked the number. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't waver. This wasn't anger anymore, it was justice. When I walked back into Matilda's room, she was awake, her eyes red but steady. I heard some of it, she whispered. I pulled the chair close and took her hand. Good. You needed to hear who he really is. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but her smile was small and brave. Thank you for not letting him win. I brushed her hair back gently. Sweetheart, he already lost the moment he chose himself over you. All I did was make sure the world sees it too. For the first time in days, her shoulders relaxed. And in that moment, I knew the first retaliation was complete. The first real counterstrike came 2 days later. I was in Matilda's room adjusting her blanket after the nurse finished a round of vitals when my phone buzzed with a new email notification. At first glance, it looked like junk legal jargon, a law firm's letterhead, but the subject line froze me cold. Notice of custody petition. Gary McCoy. I opened it, reading line after line of manufactured lies. Gary had filed an emergency motion claiming Matilda was medically unfit to care for Emma and Jack. He painted himself as the devoted father who had shouldered every burden while she languished in treatment. The words dripped with false nobility, each sentence a dagger aimed at my daughter's already fragile spirit. I looked up and saw Matilda's eyes searching mine. What is it? She asked, voice soft, almost afraid. I sat at the edge of her bed, holding her hand firmly. Gary's trying to take the kids, I said plainly. Her face crumpled, not in surprise, but in recognition. Somewhere deep down, she'd known he was capable of this. He says you're unfit, that he's the only stable parent. She shook her head, tears spilling. Stable? He hasn't been here in weeks. He doesn't even know Jack's teacher's name. I nodded. And I have proof. The court won't see a devoted father. They'll see a man drinking champagne on yachts with money he didn't earn. Still, the timing rattled me. Gary had chosen his moment well. Matilda was weak, the children confused, and our family already burdened with enough pain. His move wasn't just legal, it was psychological, a strike meant to shatter us when we were most vulnerable. I called my lawyer, a man I'd trusted since my engineering days when contracts had to be watertight. Frank, I said without preamble, I need you on a case. Family court. It's urgent. He listened as I outlined Gary's accusations. When I finished, there was a pause. Harley, with Matilda's condition, the optics are tough. But if you've got evidence, bank records, social posts, call logs, we can bury him. Judges don't take kindly to abandonment. I've got all that I said. Organized, time-stamped, cross-referenced, good Frank replied. Then Gary just walked into his own execution. We'll file a response first thing tomorrow. In the meantime, keep everything documented. Screenshots, recordings, even voicemails. He's desperate, and desperate men get sloppy. After the call, I sat back, letting the weight of the moment settle. This wasn't just about cutting Gary off financially anymore. He was trying to rewrite history, to steal my grandchildren, while their mother was still fighting for her life. I leaned close to Matilda. He can file whatever he wants. But the truth is on our side, sweetheart. and the truth always wins. She smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened with worry. Promise me, Dad. Promise me you won't let him take them. I kissed her forehead gently. I promise. On my life. The next evening, as the sun dipped low over Los Angeles and shadows stretched across the hospital floor, my phone buzzed again. Another unfamiliar number. I didn't hesitate, I knew it was Gary. I slipped into the hallway and answered, voice steady. What do you want now? His tone was venomous. You think you're clever, Harley, cutting me off, embarrassing me. But you're making a mistake. I'm her husband. Courts will see an old man meddling where he doesn't belong. I glanced back through the doorway. Matilda was half awake, her eyes fluttering. Something inside me decided not to shield her anymore. She needed to hear his voice, raw and unfiltered. I stepped just inside the room and left the phone on speaker. You had your chance, Gary, I said calmly. No, he snarled. I have the chance. She's weak, she's sick, and when she's gone, the kids are mine. You think a judge will give them to a dying woman and her washed-up father? Think again. The words hung in the sterile air like poison. Matilda's eyes widened, her lips parting as though the oxygen had been sucked from the room. She clutched at her blanket, trembling. I locked eyes with her, nodding gently to let her know she wasn't alone. Then I spoke into the phone, my voice low and deliberate. You just said that out loud, Gary. You admitted what this is about: power and control, not love. His arrogance swelled. Power is what wins custody, Harley. Money, influence. You've got neither. A silence fell, broken only by the steady beep of the monitor. Then Matilda, with a trembling voice but surprising strength, whispered, Gary, is that really you? There was a beat of stunned silence on his end, then a clumsy attempt at recovery. Matilda, sweetheart, you shouldn't be listening to this. I was just... Stop, she said sharply, her voice cracking but firm. I begged for you to come. I cried for you, and you were on a yacht. While I lay here wondering if I'd see my children grow up. Her words pierced through the cold hospital air, a blade sharper than mine. Gary stammered, his confidence unraveling. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. No, Gary, she cut him off. You don't understand what it means to be a husband or a father. You chose yourself over and over, while I chose to fight for my life. I ended the call before he could sputter another excuse. The line went dead, leaving only the quiet hum of machines. Matilda's face was wet with tears, but her grip on my hand was fierce. Thank you, she whispered hoarsely, for letting me hear it, for not protecting me from the truth. I brushed her hair back, my throat tight. Sometimes the truth is the only weapon that matters. And in that moment, something shifted. She wasn't just my sick daughter anymore. She was a woman reclaiming her dignity, and Gary's mask had finally shattered. The collapse of Gary's carefully polished image began faster than even I expected. By the weekend, screenshots of his yacht escapade had made their way onto local feeds, reposted by friends of friends who no longer had a reason to protect him. What started as whispers became open mockery, comments filled with laughter and contempt under his own posts. I sat in the hospital cafeteria with my notebook when my phone lit up with notification after notification. One of Gary's so-called business partners had tagged him demanding payment for networking events. Another account had uploaded a video clip Gary on the yacht glass raised, bragging about getting away from reality. The comments below were merciless. Reality is your wife in ICU, buddy. Imagine partying while your kids cry at home. Each new post wasn't just gossip, it was evidence. Proof that Gary's reputation, the very thing he thought would shield him in court, was being dismantled by his own arrogance. Later that day, I took the elevator to the 7th floor carrying printouts Frank had emailed me. Bank statements, screenshots, timestamps, all neatly organized. I slipped them into a manila folder and placed it beside Matilda's bed. She looked at me curiously. "What's that?" she asked, her voice weak but steady. "Everything I said. Everything we need to show the truth. His spending, his parties, his lies. It's all here." She touched the folder with trembling fingers. "Do you really think anyone will believe me over him?" I leaned forward, catching her gaze. "Matilda, this isn't about belief. This is about proof. He can spin stories, but he can't erase numbers, photos, or his own words. We have him cornered." Her lips curved into a small, tired smile. For the first time in months, I saw hope flicker behind her eyes. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Gary. It was Frank, my lawyer. "Harley," he said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "We've already had preliminary review of the custody petition. The judge isn't pleased. Seems word about Gary's little adventure has reached Chambers. I'll be filing our official response Monday morning, but let's just say the tide is turning fast." I exhaled slowly, a weight lifting. "Thank you, Frank." "You did the hard work," he replied. "Evidence wins cases. Gary buried himself. You just had the foresight to keep a shovel handy." When I returned to Matilda's room, Emma and Jack were there with a neighbor sitting quietly at the foot of the bed. Emma clutched a drawing she'd made, a stick figure family holding hands under a bright sun. Only 4 figures, not 5. She hadn't even drawn her father. My throat tightened at the silent truth children always know before adults do. I hugged both kids close, promising silently that no court, no judge, no desperate man would ever take them from their mother. Outside, the city buzzed, as it always did. But inside room 712, Gary's downfall was already well underway. By Monday morning, the manila folder had become my shield. Every page was a weapon bank records with dates and totals, screenshots, stamped with time zones, even transcriptions of Gary's late-night calls, dripping with arrogance and threats. I sat in Frank's downtown office, the hum of Los Angeles traffic muffled by the thick glass windows. Frank flipped through the folder, his brow rising higher with each turn. "Harley," he said, tapping a photo of Gary raising a champagne glass. "This isn't just evidence, it's a narrative. Abandonment, financial abuse, reputational collapse. Judges don't look kindly on fathers who desert sick mothers. He's walking into court already guilty." I leaned back, arms crossed. He thought I wouldn't fight. He thought grief had made me weak. Frank gave a dry smile. He underestimated the wrong man. "By the time we're done, the only thing Gary will be holding is a pile of declined receipts." That afternoon, the first official filing went in. Our counterclaim painted the truth, Matilda's diagnosis, her fight, Gary's absence, his misuse of my funds. It included every screenshot, every charge, every recording. Frank filed it with a quiet confidence that steadied me. But Gary wasn't finished. That evening, as I sat with Matilda, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. "Old man, you're making this worse for her. Drop it or I'll drag every one of your skeletons into the light." I stared at the words, the cowardice of a man hiding behind veiled threats. Skeletons, my life wasn't perfect, but I had never abandoned my family, never stolen from those who trusted me. If Gary wanted a fight, he was about to learn the difference between intimidation and integrity. I showed the message to Matilda. Her lips pressed into a tight line, her hand trembling in mine. "He won't stop, Dad. He's going to try to destroy you, too." I kissed her forehead. "Let him try. Every threat he makes just adds to the pile of evidence. He doesn't realize he's helping us." The next morning, Frank confirmed it. We'll file a motion to include these messages. They strengthen the argument that Gary is unfit emotionally, unstable, manipulative, dangerous to the children. Every move he makes is another nail in his own coffin. Meanwhile, Gary's so-called friends had begun to distance themselves. One of his yacht companions had even messaged me anonymously, sending photos of the unpaid bills and the furious marina staff, threatening to involve the police. His social circle was collapsing, and I was content to document every shard of it. That night, I sat by Matilda's bed again. She was stronger, sitting upright, her color returning little by little. She looked at me with quiet resolve. "Dad, you're not just protecting me anymore. You're protecting Emma and Jack's future. Don't let him near them." I squeezed her hand. "He'll never get the chance. He made his choices. Now he'll face his consequences." Outside, the neon lights of Los Angeles flickered against the dark sky. But inside room 712, I felt the steady glow of certainty. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. By the end of that week, Gary's world was unraveling as fast as Matilda's strength was returning. Every morning, I arrived at the hospital with updates for her. Not gossip, not speculation, facts. His cards declined at luxury stores. His so-called partners pulling away. His social circle evaporating under the weight of unpaid bills and whispered contempt. The man who once strutted with false confidence was now pacing like a trapped animal, his threats more frantic, his excuses more hollow. On Friday afternoon, as I sat by Matilda's bedside reading to Emma and Jack, my phone buzzed with yet another attempt from Gary. This time I answered on speaker, letting the children hear nothing but the truth. "Harley," he started, voice cracking. "I can't pay rent. My car lease is in default. I've got nowhere to go. Please just give me enough to get back on my feet. I'll make it right." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I simply looked at my daughter and my grandchildren, then spoke with calm finality. "Gary, you had years to make it right. You had months to stand by your wife. You had every chance to be a father. And every time you chose yourself. I owe you nothing, and neither do they." On the other end, he stammered, muttered, tried to spin another story. But Matilda, her voice hoarse but firm, cut him off. "We're done, Gary. Don't call again." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. I ended the call, blocked his number one final time, and set the phone down. Emma reached over, slipping her small hand into Matilda's. "Mommy, does that mean Daddy's gone?" Matilda swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "Yes, baby. But Grandpa and I are here, and we're not going anywhere." That night, when the children were back with the neighbor and the room was quiet again, Matilda turned to me. "Dad, for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. Even with the cancer, even with everything, I feel lighter without him." I brushed her hair back gently, the way I used to when thunderstorms frightened her as a child. That's because truth is heavier than any sickness. And now the truth is out. The next morning, Frank called with news that sealed it. The judge reviewed everything. Gary's custody petition is already in jeopardy. With the evidence we've presented, it's only a matter of time before he's stripped of any claim. I thanked him, then walked to the window of room 712. Los Angeles glimmered under the rising sun, but my gaze was fixed on my daughter, thin, fragile, but free from the weight of lies. For the first time since stepping off that plane, I allowed myself to hope. Gary had counterattacked, but his ammunition had turned to dust in his hands. And now, with every legal motion filed, with every piece of evidence secured, we were ready to deliver the final blow. By the time the court date approached, Gary was a hollow echo of the man he once pretended to be. His once flashy social media had gone silent, his friends had scattered, and the yacht company had filed a formal complaint against him for non-payment. Every move he made now left a trail of humiliation. One evening, as I sat on the porch outside the hospital with a styrofoam cup of coffee, my phone buzzed again, this time with an unknown caller ID. Against my better judgment, I answered. The voice on the other end was shaky, unsteady. "Gary, Harley, I don't know what to do," he said, the arrogance stripped from his tone. "They've repossessed my car. The landlord's changing the locks. I can't even get a hotel room because every card is dead. Please, I'm begging you, just give me enough to get back on my feet." I let his words hang in the night air. He wasn't calling as a husband or even as a father. He was calling as a parasite looking for a new host. "Gary," I said evenly, "you had everything. A wife who loved you. Children who needed you. And instead you chose yachts and champagne. You burned every bridge yourself. There's nothing left for me to give." His voice cracked into anger. "You think you've won. You think cutting me off makes you some kind of hero. When Matilda dies, and you'll be stuck with 2 kids and no future. I'll be free." I clenched my jaw but forced myself to stay calm. "No, Gary. You won't be free. You'll be remembered as the man who abandoned his family at their lowest point. And trust me, that memory will follow you further than any yacht ever could." He tried one last time, his desperation bleeding through. "I can change, Harley. I swear. Just give me one more chance." I thought of Matilda's weary eyes, of Emma's drawing with 4 figures instead of 5, of Jack's small voice asking why his father never came. My answer was firm. No more chances. I hung up and blocked the number. Again. This time I didn't feel the tension of doubt or the pull of grief. I felt only resolve. Gary's collapse was his own doing, and I was merely the witness documenting his descent. When I returned to Matilda's room, she was awake, sitting up with a faint smile. "Was that him?" she asked. "Yes," I admitted. And it was the sound of a man who's lost everything. She nodded slowly, her eyes brighter than I'd seen in weeks. "Good. Then maybe now we can start to heal." I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. For the first time in months, the weight felt lighter, the future clearer. Gary's final collapse had begun, and soon the reckoning would follow. The day of the hearing dawned gray, the kind of morning that carried the weight of storms without rain. I arrived at the courthouse with my lawyer Frank, the manila folder under my arm like a shield. Each page inside was another weapon sharpened by truth. As we stepped through the metal detectors and into the echoing halls, I reminded myself this wasn't about vengeance. It was about protection. Gary was already there, sitting outside the courtroom in a cheap suit that looked borrowed, his tie askew. His once practiced grin was gone, replaced by nervous glances and twitching hands. He barely looked at me as I walked past, but I could feel the resentment radiating from him. He still thought charm might save him. He was about to learn charm crumbles under evidence. Inside, the judge listened first to Gary's attorney, who painted him as a victim. "My client has been the sole provider while his wife undergoes treatment," the lawyer said, his voice oozing false sympathy. "He seeks custody to provide stability for the children and prevent undue hardship." I sat still, my jaw tight, waiting for my turn. Frank leaned over and whispered, "Just breathe. Let the evidence do the talking." When our moment came, Frank stood calm and deliberate. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a devoted husband, but a man who abandoned his wife during her battle with stage 4 cancer and used her father's money to fund his lifestyle. We submit Exhibit A bank statements showing tens of thousands spent on yachts, luxury goods, and fine dining, all while Mrs. McCoy lay in intensive care." He laid out the documents on the bench, one by one, the paper slapping against the wood with precision. Each sound echoed like a hammer. Exhibit B, social media posts from Mr. McCoy, time-stamped, location-tagged, corresponding directly to the expenditures. Exhibit C, recordings of Mr. McCoy threatening to strip custody from his dying wife and admitting he needed a break while she fought for her life. The courtroom grew silent, the air heavy with disbelief. Gary shifted in his chair, his face draining of color. His attorney shuffled papers nervously, but no amount of spin could erase the damning evidence glowing on the screens before the judge. Finally, Frank delivered the finishing blow. Your Honor, we also submit statements from the children's neighbor confirming Mr. McCoy's absence from the home and his neglect of basic parental duties. It is clear that custody belongs with their mother, and that Mr. McCoy poses not just instability, but active harm. The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers. His gaze moved from the evidence to Gary, who sat slumped eyes darting like a man cornered. Mr. McCoy, the judge said evenly, do you have any response? Gary's mouth opened, but no words came. Just silence. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the tide fully turn. Truth wasn't just on our side, it was crushing him under its weight. The judge didn't rush. He sifted through the evidence with a measured calm, pausing often, his pen tapping lightly against the bench. The silence stretched long enough for Gary to shift uncomfortably in his seat, sweat beading along his brow. Finally, the gavel came down once, not for order, but for conclusion. Mr. McCoy, the judge, began, voice steady. What I see before me is not a picture of devotion, but of abandonment. While your wife endured intensive medical treatment, you used her father's resources to fund luxuries absent from both her care and your children's lives. The court cannot and will not entrust custody to a man who prioritizes yachts over family. Gary's face collapsed, his hands tightening into fists on the table. The judge continued. Custody remains with Mrs. McCoy, supported by her father, McCoy is ordered to pay restitution for funds misused, though given his current state, the practicality of recovery is uncertain. Regardless, his parental access is suspended until reviewed by this court at a later date. The gavel struck again. Decision made. Final. Beside me, Frank exhaled with quiet satisfaction, while I felt a weight lift from my chest. I looked at Gary one last time. His eyes darted to mine, not with anger now, but with the hollow stare of a man who'd gambled everything and lost. Afterward, I walked Matilda out of the courthouse, her arm looped carefully through mine. She was pale from the effort, but her chin was lifted high. Reporters lingered at the steps, but we pushed past, ignoring their questions. For once, she didn't hide behind me. She faced the world with her head held steady even as her body trembled. Back home in Texas, weeks later, life began to look different. Matilda started her mornings with slow walks in the garden, the sun warming her cheeks as she watered new blooms. She was still thin, still fragile, but there was life in her again, life that wasn't tethered to machines or fear of abandonment. Emma and Jack adjusted quickly, their laughter filling the house in ways I hadn't heard since they were toddlers. Jack begged me to teach him how to throw a football spiral, while Emma pulled me toward her art projects, insisting each crayon masterpiece deserved a place on the fridge. Their innocence reminded me daily of why this fight had been worth every ounce of strength I had left. One evening, as Matilda set cornbread on the table, she looked at me with tears glistening in her eyes. Dad, I never thought I'd get here. I thought cancer would take everything, my health, my kids, my dignity, but you gave me all of it back. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Sweetheart, you gave it back to yourself. I just cleared the obstacles. She smiled, then a smile I hadn't seen in years, full, genuine, untouched by fear. And in that moment, I knew we weren't just surviving anymore. We were beginning again. Spring in Texas has a way of softening the hardest memories. The air smells of fresh earth and wildflowers, and even the cicadas sound like a chorus of second chances. It was during one of those mornings that Matilda came into the kitchen, a folded paper clutched in her trembling hand. I looked up from the coffee pot and saw tears brimming in her eyes, but this time they weren't born of pain. "Dad," she whispered, handing me the paper. It was a medical report, crisp and official. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words I hadn't dared hope to read: complete remission. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the page, my vision blurring as relief swelled inside me. When I finally found my voice, it cracked like dry timber. "You did it, sweetheart. You fought, and you won." Matilda laughed through her tears, the sound light and musical, a sound I hadn't heard since before Martha passed. "We won," she corrected, sliding into the chair beside me. "You, me, the kids, we fought together." Later that day, Emma and Jack ran barefoot across the backyard, chasing each other with the kind of wild joy only children know. The garden, once brown and brittle, now burst with color. Matilda's roses had returned, their petals opening wide as if to welcome her back to life. She knelt by them, carefully clipping one bloom and holding it against her cheek like an old friend. I stood on the porch watching her. For months I'd seen nothing but shadows under her eyes, weakness in her limbs, fear in her smile. Now I saw strength, real, unshakable strength, born not of denial, but of survival. She had been to the edge and come back with fire in her veins. That evening we gathered around the dinner table. Matilda served cornbread, the recipe Martha had taught her years ago, filling the house with a familiar warmth. As Jack bragged about a football play at recess, and Emma proudly displayed a drawing of our family, I realized something profound. For the first time since the diagnosis, we weren't talking about sickness. We were talking about life, ordinary, beautiful, mundane life. After the kids had gone to bed, Matilda joined me on the porch swing, the same one I'd rebuilt from Martha's old frame. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "You kept your promise, Dad," she said softly. "You said I wouldn't be alone again. And I haven't been." I wrapped an arm around her, rocking us gently beneath the Texas stars. Sweetheart, storms pass. But families, when they choose to fight for each other, they last forever. She smiled at that, eyes shining in the starlight. For the first time in years, I believed it too. Victory didn't come with confetti or applause. It came on an ordinary Tuesday evening, sitting on the porch swing, with my grandchildren curled against me, the smell of fresh cornbread drifting from the kitchen. The stars emerged one by one in the Texas sky, and for the first time in years, I felt peace that wasn't fleeting. Emma snuggled closer, holding a sketchbook in her lap. She'd drawn us again, stick figures under a giant sun, smiling wide. 4 figures, me, her Jack, and Matilda. No missing pieces, no space for the man who had chosen himself over his family. She looked up at me and whispered, "Grandpa, we're safe now, right?" I kissed the top of her head. "Yes, sweetheart. You're safe. You'll always be safe." Jack, still buzzing from a game of catch earlier, leaned against my side. "Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you. Not muscles strong, but the kind of strong that doesn't let bad guys win." His words caught me off guard. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "You already are strong, Jack. Stronger than you know." Inside, Matilda hummed softly as she cleaned the kitchen, a simple tune Martha used to sing. For months I had feared I'd lose her too, that cancer would strip me of my daughter the way grief had stripped me of my wife. But instead I'd watched her rise again, not just surviving, but reclaiming her life piece by piece. That was victory enough. Gary had been silenced not by my rage but by his own choices exposed under the weight of evidence and truth. His downfall wasn't a scene of dramatic confrontation. It was quieter, crueler. A man undone by the reflection in his own mirror, abandoned by the very reputation he clung to. I didn't need to chase him anymore. His absence was louder than any presence could have been. The real triumph was hear Emma's laughter as she showed me her victory dance. Jack's determination as he begged for just one more throw, Matilda's steady smile as she leaned in the doorway, watching her children thrive in a home no longer poisoned by lies. As the night deepened, Matilda joined us on the swing. She took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Dad, this is what winning looks like, isn't it?" I looked at her, at the children, at the garden blooming again, and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. Winning isn't about revenge. It's about protecting what matters most, and finally finding peace." We sat in silence then, the kind of silence that doesn't ache but soothes. The swing creaked softly beneath us. The stars burned steady overhead. And for the first time since I'd stepped onto that plane to Los Angeles, I knew we had built something unbreakable. This was our justice. Not Gary's ruin, but our restoration. Looking back now, I realize justice didn't come from humiliating Gary or watching his life collapse. It came from protecting my daughter when she needed me most, from giving my grandchildren the stability they deserved, and from finding strength I thought grief had buried forever. Gary's betrayal was a storm that nearly destroyed us, but storms pass. What lasts is family, the people who stand beside you when the world feels unbearable. If there's one lesson I hope you take from my story, it's this: betrayal doesn't have to define the ending. You can choose to rebuild, to protect, to love fiercely, even when it feels impossible. Sometimes revenge isn't about tearing someone else down. It's about lifting up the people who matter and refusing to let cruelty win. To those of you who are parents or grandparents, I ask you to think about how you're treating your family today. Are you giving them the loyalty and love they deserve? And to those who've been betrayed, I want you to remember, you can come out stronger. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted deeply? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from it? Share your story in the comments below. I'll be reading. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. And thank you for being here to listen.